Denmark is moving forward with a world-first carbon tax on agriculture. Now, the Danish government is planning on taxing farmers up to 80 quid for every single cow to encourage less meat consumption and to tackle climate change. Well, Danish ministers hope the proceeds from the tax to help farmers to go green. Well, is this an utterly mad policy, or do policymakers deserve a pat on the back? To discuss it, I'm joined now by the Agricultural Policy Analyst for the Consumer Choice Centre, Bill Wirtz. Bill, welcome to the show. A meat tax sounds like yet another sinister nudge to make us all vegans. And what about the impact on the farming industry in Denmark?
Oh, it's definitely going to be a big one. I mean, the Danish government just did this because they did poorly in the European elections. The Green Party did pretty well. So now they decided to make meat more expensive for everyone and make life harder for farmers. So this is one of those measures that sounds better in theory than it will be in practice, because just because you implemented a tax doesn't mean beef consumption will go down. And the most interesting example here is that in 2012, Denmark implemented a tax on saturated fat consumption, back when that was the big enemy. And what did people do in Denmark? For a year, they bought their butter in Germany. So what you're doing with these kind of taxes is you're shifting the CO2 consumption elsewhere. So technically, on paper, it could very well be that Denmark can say we will be successful with such a tax because people just buy that that meat from other countries. For instance, Poland is a big exporter of beef. So it's one of those measures that on paper you can look green, but that doesn't mean that in practice you did anything except fill the coffers of the treasury for half a year, and then the other half a year you say, oh well, look at all green policies, they were effective.
Now, Bill, the question is, are the Danish farmers going to take this lying down? We saw in France the farmers were revolting, spraying silage at town halls. We saw in Brussels setting fire to tyres. Precisely these kind of initiatives cause a massive backlash across the EU. What do you think is going to happen in Denmark?
Well, it's fascinating to me because we've had farmer protests in every EU member country ever since the Dutch government tried to get livestock farmers off of their balance sheets by removing essentially their farms completely, by trying to buy them out. And now the Danish government looks at all those months of protests and thinks, oh, if only we could do the same thing, because farmers are definitely not going to take this lying down. The farmer representatives already have been calling for protests in the wake of this new tax. It will only start in 2030, but up until then, there will still be moments to revise it. Again, the fat tax in 2012 was removed after just 14 months by the same government majority. So I think it's one of those things that now you read the news that, oh, it will be implemented, but when it's actually silently abolished, nobody will talk about it anymore.
And Bill, anybody with half a brain knows that simply what happens is local farmers get forced out of business or prices go up for consumers. And as a consequence, they simply import beef from Brazil, from Argentina, from countries that don't have any of these policies in place. Presumably, does that mean that these Greens in Denmark, they have less than half a brain?
It seems like that to me. And again, I don't think there's something necessarily wrong. I'm a free trader. I think it is good that we trade with other countries all around the world. And if you want to buy Argentinian beef, that's your prerogative. Go and buy it. I think we should have more trade deals. However, making life artificially difficult for our own farmers and then being surprised that everything comes from abroad is one of those things that we've been doing for way too long. And we always keep being surprised why it happens. Why are our farmers struggling? And the most important thing, I think, also is for consumers. We don't really understand what the real price of food is, because on the one hand, you're taxing farmers. And on the other hand, you're going to the taxpayer and saying we need to subsidize farmers because we have fewer each year. So what is the real price of food? It's really hard to understand it. We need a better system. We need to stop blaming agriculture for all the green woes that we think we have. I think we all want to protect the environment, but we need to do it in a way that protects the people that make our food. This seems so self-evident to me. And if anything, the European election results should have been an indicator that we need to break with those green policies that we had for the last 5 years.
Bill Wirtz, fascinating stuff. Let's see what happens. Will those farmers in Denmark have a major beef with their government? Thanks for joining us, Bill Wirtz. Always a pleasure.